So, as some of you will know, I recently did a video about H-Bomber stream to raise £300,000 for the charity Mermaids that they say helps trans kids. They say they do this by empowering families and young people with tools they need to negotiate the education and health services, reduce suicidality and self-harm to the young people who contact mermaids, improve the self-esteem and social functioning of the gender variant children, improve awareness of all this stuff, including the practices of GPs and other social services, and just generally not making kids feel isolated. And they've even got their own forum for the trans kids and the parents of trans kids. And if that's all they were actually doing, I would be absolutely happy with this charity existing, because ultimately that basically makes them a child line for trans kids. However, my video wasn't exactly well received with certain areas of the community, and with certain people saying that I should absolutely take it down because I called mermaids child abusers. And I go through the video and through a Times article that explains exactly how they abused a child. So that video stays up, and I recommend you watch it before this, because this is sort of a part 2 to why mermaids are total bastards. So here we go. Governor quits blinkered Tavistock trans clinic. NHS trust under fire for untrue response after doctors warn of lobby pushing fast-track gender transition for children. Well, that doesn't sound very good, does it? So, a governor of the NHS trust that runs the England's only gender clinic for children has resigned in protest at its blinkered and one-sided response to doctors who had raised the alarm about woefully inadequate care. Marcus Evans, a consultant psychotherapist at the Tavistock and Portsmouth Trust with 3 decades experience, told the Sunday Times that the trust had said that they were not true and had created a climate of fear that was trying to dismiss or undermine concerns raised by its own clinician. I am sad to be ending my proud 34-year association with the trust, Evans wrote in his resignation letter. However, I do not have confidence that these serious issues are going to be sufficiently addressed and dealt with in a thorough, thoughtful and balanced way. So let's get this straight. The man has said that clinicians and doctors have brought up that there is inadequate care at this trust, and the clinicians seem to really think that something's going on here that's a bit wrong, and the governor has resigned because the response to this has been inadequate and very one-sided. I wonder which side this all falls on. So, carrying on, 25 other clinicians at the trust have signed a letter protesting against how it has handled the concerns of medical staff. The 25 said the attitude of managers was not acceptable. In a report leaked to this newspaper last week, some staff at the Tavistock's Gender Identity Development Service, or GIDS, said it was exposing young patients to long-term damage because of its inability to stand up to the pressure from highly politicised campaigners and families demanding fast-track gender transition. It's not like I went through the mermaids in the last video and explained how this is exactly what they were pushing for. It's not like doctors are against this who actually know what they're doing. It's not like they actually don't care about kids and just have a higher virtue they believe they have to go after that's just going to put kids in a state of being totally fucking unable to cope with handling society because they can't live a normal life. Stop abusing kids! I also want to mention in the last video, if you didn't see it, that I actually went through a blog and it found out that 60 to 90% of kids who said they were transgender turn out to just be gay when they turn into adulthood. Like, these people are trying to push something on kids that they aren't more than likely not going to want when they turn 18 and realise that they were just homosexual. I do want to point that out because I think that's pretty fucking important. The report, compiled by David Bell, a clinician and former governor at the trust, said the staff had very serious ethical concerns that children were making life-changing decisions with inadequate examination and consent. Some openly homophobic parents pushed their children to transition because they were gay, the report said. In other cases, youngsters seized on the transition as a solution after abuse or bereavement. Their histories were not properly explored by clinicians struggling with huge and unmanageable caseloads and afraid of being accused of transphobia if they questioned the rehearsed surface presentation. I want to repeat that last sentence. Clinicians struggling with a huge and unmanageable caseloads and afraid of being accused of transphobia if they question the rehearsed surface presentation. Is there a reason there is a huge and unmanageable caseload, I wonder? It's not that mermaids are gaslighting kids into thinking that they're trans when really they're just doing what every kid does and exploring gender roles. And it's not like they have randomly accused people of transphobia who have genuine concerns. It's not like I'm thinking about Graham Linehan there or anything. The report said GIDS had tried to placate lobby groups such as Mermaids charity, which campaigns for children to be given sex change treatment. Yes, they actually name mermaids. I warned you! Didn't I say that mermaids were part of this? Mermaids, I'm asking you directly now. Please stop abusing children. Thanks. After the leak, the Trust published a statement on its website claiming Bell's report was unsubstantiated, the case studies were hypothetical, and he had no expertise in this field. I'm sorry, you're saying that he doesn't have enough experience in this field despite the fact that he was a clinician and a former governor at the Trust? I'm sorry, but that just seems like damage control and an outright lie. It did so even though a review it had commissioned in response to Bell's report by the Trust's medical director Dinesh Sinha had found that some of the concerns were valid. Oh, funny that. Sinha said individuals' caseloads were excessive, that they worked in an atmosphere of significant persecution created by lobbyists, and the staff were not sure whether children understood the effects of their fertility of starting sex change treatment. He made 26 recommendations, but said the clinic was safe. So you don't know whether children understand the effect on their fertility in the future, and yet you're still trying to say it's safe. Again, I think this is just basic damage control, but clearly the concerns that Bell raised are clearly in some way true. A GIDS clinician who contributed to Bell's report but asked to remain anonymous said last week that the case studies were real and that they had personally treated some of the children described. So it is damage control and an outright lie, at least according to this anonymous source. Which, okay, it's an anonymous source, but I'm going to take their word for it, because honestly, there is way too much evidence that this is all true. Evans said things in the statement simply were not true. He added that Bell, a former president of the British Psychoanalytic Society... Okay, they did say Bell. I'm sorry, I do have to laugh at this, because they said Bell was not an expert in this field, and that he made an unsubstantiated report, but he was a president of a psychoanalytic society. I'd say that he is an expert in the field of psychoanalysis, which is exactly what deeming whether kids are trans is. But anyway, I'll continue. Had one of the biggest reputations in the Tavistock, yet he's treated like some sort of charlatan in order to defend their position. The statement has now been removed from the Trust's website. Well, I'm not surprised, because they're in full damage control mode. Separately, a group of academics in the field of gender have written to the Sunday Times attacking the Trust's attempt to discredit Bell and saying that for the sake of the health of thousands of children, it should encourage scientific investigation and ethical debate. Now, there's a lot of anonymous people defending this, and I'm only saying this because it's happened every other time. I think it's because these highly politicised charities such as Mermaids are doing their best to try and ruin people's lives who are going against their agenda. And this includes Graham Linehan. I am defending Graham Linehan, even though I've attacked him in the past, because on this he is correct. They need to stop abusing kids. They need to let kids be kids, and they really need to stop trying to ruin and castrate the kids, because if it turns out they're gay, which 60 to 90% of the time it turns out to be true, although it's with a small sample size, then it's going to ruin their lives. Ministers are concerned that the number of children referred to GIDS has multiplied eightfold in 5 years, almost 3 times the rise for adult gender transition. It is understood that GIDS is to be given a grant of research into the situation. And I also believe that about a third of the kids who end up at GIDS have turned out to either have Asperger's or autism. And I believe that's because they are easier to gaslight. At least that's my hypothesis. I don't actually know. But that's what I would personally suspect. The Tavistock said the Trust is confident that Dr. Sinha, with oversight from a non-executive board member and a governor, has conducted a thorough and fair review of the issues raised. It has been very disappointed at the unauthorised disclosure of Dr. Bell's confidential report to the media. Well, to be honest, if I was in his situation, I don't know what the hell else I would do either. Because Mermaid seems to just be getting away with literal murder of the future suicides that they're going to have to deal with. Because what the hell would you do if you turned 18, realised you were just gay, and then realised that you'd completely castrated yourself, turned yourself into a woman, let's say you're a gay man instead, right? And you were totally sterile, totally infertile, totally incapable of getting an erection even if there was some miraculous surgery to undo the damage you did to your own genitals to become a woman. There seems to be a lot of danger here that is really, really, really gone into oversight when it comes to mermaids. They seem to just want to push their agenda forward, and that's exactly the type of thing I get from the history of them. And the thing is that the National Lottery Community Fund has confirmed it will be supporting mermaids with a grant of $500,000 over the course of the next 5 years. One of the main aims of the grant is for mermaids to provide local support groups for transgender and gender variant children and their families across the UK. There are few such local support groups at the moment, and the grant will change this. This is a fundamental and significant change. The grant means there will now be local support where currently there is none. This cannot be a bad thing. Well, from the way that the only trust in the UK we have has gone, yes, this can only be a bad thing, assuming that these reports are right. And to be honest, with the amount of support it's got, I'm assuming it is. The UK will now be a better place for transgender and gender variant children and their families. I can't believe the National Lottery has actually given them this money. But as I said, I go into more detail as to why mermaids are absolutely terrible and why the transgender debate and the whole thing around it is just in absolute disarray at the moment in my previous video, with a link in the description to that video. But for now, I will leave you with an analogy. Throughout the 1800s, when medical science was rudimentary, doctors in the Victorian times would do absolute lavish experiments in the name of medicine. And this was because they didn't understand medicine and they didn't really have any safeguarding for their patients, and it was especially bad for mentally ill patients. They would beat the mentally ill patients, they would do all this sort of torture to them. They would do it in the name of what they thought was science because they didn't know any better than to think that they were just mad. However, now it has gone the other way. Now we have entire trusts that people are leaving on an ethical basis because what these people are doing to these children, they are experimenting on them. They are by definition experimenting on them because we don't fully understand what actually happens when you put, say, a child on hormone blockers and what happens to them when they turn 40. We can't possibly know this because no child has gone through hormone blockers throughout puberty and come out the other end in before 10 years ago, or thereabouts. This has become common practice in the name of social justice. It is social justice because the LGBT community, and specifically the trans part of that community, appear to be overwhelmingly protected by the state, and this is proven by the amount of people who have been warned for doing something as simple as liking a limerick that insults trans people. This is why there are many anonymous people writing in complaint about this, and this is why people like Graham Linehan, although he's a turf and a bastard in some ways, is doing what he can to try and stop these children from being abused. I know for a fact he doesn't mind people being transgender because my friend Rose of Dawn has had civil Twitter conversations with him where neither party has particularly insulted each other. At least when they're talking about trans issues. When it comes to things like Count Dankula, they disagree highly, but they don't mind. So, this isn't actually a trans issue. This is an issue of child abuse. And this child abuse cannot go on. I cannot sit by as these NHS trusts, where they openly say they don't know whether it's safe or not, and we are not even sure if these children are able to consent to these procedures, are doing their best to be lobbied into doing the procedures anyway. The NHS is already in a lot of trouble. It's underfunded, it's struggling, and what you're doing now is going to get it sued into the ground, and it is going to play right into the hands of the people who want it privatised. Now, assuming you actually want it privatised, I'm sure you don't want kids abused in the process of it getting privatised. But for those of you that never want it privatised, well, you're going the right way about getting it privatised, so congratulations. But that is absolutely everything I had to say on this issue for today. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.